Great. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Library Trustees meeting of January 11, 2022. The time is 6 p.m. Ginger, do you want to call the roll?
Sure, the time is 6:04. Trustee Cortez,
Here.
Trustee Hahn,
Here.
Trustee Lentini,
Here.
Trustee Vadot,
Here.
Chair Duque.
Here. Ginger, do you want to explain how the public can participate in this evening's agenda?
Yes, I will. I don't see any attendees, but I will do that. Good evening, everyone. Viewers are welcome to provide public comment online through Zoom or by telephone at 253-215-8782. And the meeting ID is 858-5649-0636#. If you are watching the meeting on Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please select the raise hand feature either on the bottom of your screen or through the participants icon. If you are participating by telephone and wish to provide public comment, please press *9 when the chair opens the public comment period. When it is your turn to speak, you will be notified that the host is inviting you to participate. You will need to press *6 to unmute yourself. Once you are unmuted, you will have 3 minutes to provide your comments.
Thank you, Ginger. Are there any amendments to this evening's agenda? Nope. Okay, so let's move on to the first agenda item, approve regular meeting minutes of November 9th, 2021. Are there any questions from trustees? Public comment?
No attendees at this time.
Not attendees. Okay, so should I call alphabetically to offer comments or happy with no one raising their hands?
If no one raised their hands, then Ginger can call for, or you can call for a motion to accept the minutes.
Okay. Yeah. I request a motion. Does anyone?
I'll move to approve the minutes as submitted.
I'll second
Thank
it.
you. Great, Ginger, if you want to roll call the vote.
Okay, Trustee Cortez,
Aye.
Trustee Hahn,
Aye.
Trustee Lentini,
Aye.
Trustee Vadot,
Aye.
Chair Duque.
Aye. Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item. Introductions, awards, recognitions, presentations.
So today's presentation will be by our new supervising librarian, Katie Port, about reimagining adult outreach. Take it away, Katie.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to coming to you live from the library. I'm going to remove my mask so it's a little easier for you to see me. My name is Katie Port. I'm a new supervising librarian at the library. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to meeting you all and working with you. One of my responsibilities at the library is overseeing our outreach programs. And so tonight I'm going to talk about what we're doing for outreach and how we're thinking about what we do. So hang on one second while I share my screen. All right, it's just giving me, yeah, let me just get to that. This is a new version of Zoom, and I have to change the preferences on it. So give me one sec. Okay. Oh gosh. Okay, Henry, do you happen to have a copy of my slides that you could share? Okay,
Yeah, I'm just downloading those and I'm gonna share it and we can tag team just a
Great.
sec. And get that and
thanks, Henry. And while Henry does that, I'm just going to try logging in on another computer and see if that's faster. Thanks for your patience, guys. It's always fun doing things live. Oh, thanks, Henry. That's perfect. Okay. Great. So we've already discussed this reimagining library outreach. So moving ahead, Henry. So outreach is a term that most libraries use as sort of an umbrella term. It encompasses two related but separate ideas, right? So library outreach is a way to bring the library services to people who are, for whatever reason, are not able to use the library, who can't come in and use the building or materials in a traditional way. But when we say outreach, we also include the idea of promoting the library's programs or services to folks who may not know what it is that we do at the library. And as I note, traditionally, outreach has focused heavily on students, so K through 12 students, and also homebound adults who are unable to come into the library. And we'll talk more about both of those groups in just a few minutes. But for now, we can move on. So here are some questions I like to ask. I like to consider myself and ask staff to consider when we're thinking about library outreach. So first of all is, whom are we not reaching with our current efforts? And I think one mistake libraries can sometimes make is we have the library building, we buy the materials, we open the doors, a lot of people come in, a lot of people check things out, and we think, hey, we're doing a great job here. And we are, absolutely, but it's worth thinking about who is not here, who is missing from what we're doing. And why might that be? Is it because they're not interested in what we're doing? Fair enough. Or is it because they're not aware of what we're doing? And so another mistake I think libraries sometimes make is, we know that people in the community, they drive by the library, they walk by, they bicycle by, and they see the building and they see the sign that says library, and they think, okay, I know what they do there. I know what that is. And I think one thing all of us know from being in the library world is that that's not necessarily true. People may not be aware of what we're doing at the library. And that may be because they're operating on some historical idea of what the library is. As you know, we've evolved a lot in the last century. So it's important to make sure that part of what we do at the library is to let people know what we currently offer in case it's of interest to them. Okay, next, Henry. So let's talk first about reimagining school outreach. As I said, this has been a traditional focus of library outreach. And traditionally, having a library class visit, having a school class visit the library, or having library staff visit schools has focused heavily on getting students cards. And in 2017, my colleagues here forged a partnership with San Rafael City Schools that allows the library to automatically issue cards to all K through 12 students in the district. So this is fantastic. We love it. We've issued over 12,000 cards now, and that allows us to focus and target our outreach to students who may not be aware of what we do at the library. So as I mentioned, we would like to focus on folks who need to know what we do. So last fall, our librarians Lee and Alejandra met with 6 classes of newcomers to the US at Davidson Middle School to explain what we do at the library. And it's especially important with newcomers to the US, both students and adults, people of all ages really, to remember that they may come from a nation or culture where the free public library is not an institution. So either it doesn't exist or it exists in another way. So for example, some countries have libraries that are private or exist on a subscription or membership model. So you need to pay to join, there's an annual fee, that kind of thing. So we need to keep in mind that not everyone knows that the public library in the US is free. It belongs to all of us, and that they already have a card and they can use it. So Lee is also starting an English conversation club for US newcomers later this month. And I know she's really excited about that, and we're excited for her. So let's talk next about reimagining outreach to homebound adults. And this also has been a group that we've traditionally focused on. And at San Rafael, in the past, we used library volunteers to make home deliveries of library materials. And that program came to a halt early in the pandemic for a couple of reasons. First of all, many of the homebound adults we were serving were older adults who were uniquely vulnerable to COVID and did not feel comfortable receiving deliveries. But also a lot of our volunteers were older adults and they did not feel comfortable making visits. So while that program's on pause, it gives us a chance to consider some other possibilities. And those include, we could start delivering again using library staff. That obviously would not necessarily scale very well to the number of people we'd like to serve, but it might be a good way to kind of reboot or kickstart the program. The advantage being that our staff are already here on site, they're already familiar with the collection, and it would be easy for them to do so. We also could consider using the US Postal Service to deliver materials. So the San Francisco Public Library, which has a very robust outreach program, does it entirely by mail, entirely by US mail, and that would be a model worth considering. And in that vein, is there a way that we could use existing delivery routes or local networks to deliver things? And I have to thank Henry for this idea. For example, the Whistle Stop shuttle, Vivalon shuttle, is currently serving a lot of homebound or mobility impaired adults in our community. So would there be a way maybe to tag along with those deliveries and use it for library materials? And similarly, could we use the San Rafael Strong Neighborhood system to engage volunteers to deliver to people in their own neighborhood? And that's of interest because it would lessen the environmental impact of deliveries. So for example, if you could come to the library in the normal way and then also pick up things for someone who lives around the corner or down the block from you, that might be a way to consider reaching folks who are homebound. And I also just wanted to mention in passing, scheduled visits to care facilities. That obviously is not something we're able to do right now during this ongoing pandemic and current surge. But I've had a lot of success in the past with library staff visits to care facilities, both to provide materials, but also just to offer a program, do a reading, even stuff like offering a craft or something can be a great way to reach folks in those facilities. Okay, so next, let's talk about reimagining community outreach. Henry, next slide. Thank you. And so by community outreach, I just mean anyone that I haven't mentioned before. And that's really where we'd like to focus. How can we reach folks we haven't reached before, right? And some of the folks we are thinking about include, this slide says Spanish-speaking older adults, but I want to say Spanish-speaking people of all ages in our community. We know that a large percentage of people in San Rafael speak Spanish as a first language now. And I mentioned children ages 0 to 5. So we're now catching students as they appear in the school district, but is there a way to reach them before that, right? Can we work with childcare facilities, home daycares, reach kids in those critical 0 through 5 years? And similarly, can we reach Spanish-speaking older adults? I did also make a reference here to, patrons experiencing homelessness is a great area for focus with the city's new services and support center. That might be a way to reach some of those folks, and we have some ideas there. And then I also mentioned partnerships with community organizations, because I'm working now with one of the doctors at Marin Community Clinics on the idea of a free bookshelf so that children coming for well visits would be able to take home a free book. And on it would be a sticker or something that says, would you like more books? Come to the library, right? And so if they're over age 5, they may already have a card in our system. So to that end of reaching new groups, we've created a new outreach team at San Rafael. We've got 8 people on the team and 4 of them are bilingual in Spanish. And we're hoping that will help us expand our reach. No, right ahead, Henry, you're perfectly on time. So just to go over what we talked about, traditionally, we've focused our outreach on K through 12 students and homebound adults. And we're now looking to expand our reach to include groups like newcomers to the US, Spanish speakers, and other groups we haven't reached in the past, including people experiencing homelessness. And to that end, we have a new 8-person outreach team, which includes 4 staff who are bilingual in Spanish. So I welcome your thoughts on that. Outreach is always a community-focused project, and I love to hear what other people think about it. So if you have comments or questions or thoughts to add, I would welcome that, and I will yield to those questions now.
Thanks, Katie.
Hi, Katie. Jamie Cortez, if we're okay. Adriana, to move forward with questions.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I just am inserting myself effort in the whole system.
I invite questions and answers from trustees to staff.
Katie, nice to meet you. Thanks for this. I think it's really great to hear all these, continuing and new outreach efforts. And so just offering some thoughts that is Rolling Roots. So Rolling Roots, it's with the Agricultural Institute of Marin. So they bring all of their healthy foods to spots for underserved communities, and a lot of them are seniors, so they can just walk out of their house or someone will come bring them food. And so that might be a really great opportunity there. And then the other one I was going to suggest was Marin Child Care Council. So Marin Child Care Council, besides being sort of the hub of people finding childcare providers, they actually train all of the family child care providers so that people can get licensed. And so that's a really great part of letting those providers know that they can come in and they can get that, theirs, and that to tell the families that they care for to come get books and do that. So I just wanted to offer those 2 ideas, but I think your other ideas are brilliant. So thank you.
Thanks, I love that. I'm taking notes.
Hi, Katie.
Trustee
Alex,
Vedot.
nice to meet you. Oh, sorry, did I skip over someone?
No, I was just calling you up because I saw you raise your hand. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Katie. Good to meet you. I'm Alex. I was going to say, when you mentioned the partnership with the community clinics and the free book, I just thought that was a great idea, because Kaiser does the same thing. They give a free book out after pediatric visits, and those books are just like on repeat ad nauseum with my toddler. So whenever she goes for her well check, and I'm like, for a month straight, I'm reading the book that she gets. So I think that's a wonderful idea. The other thing I was thinking, I know it's obviously the Marin County Free Library up at the Civic Center, but is there any way, as the weather gets warmer, to think maybe to partner with farmers markets to, have a booth, like obviously in downtown San Rafael, and then in the Civic Center, so people know about the library that way? Because at least with San Rafael, it's kind of a great segue. If people know about the library and it's so close right there. I know obviously if it's at the I'm stepping on toes. I think Henry's raising.
No, I wanted to respond to your suggestion, just with a little background. We did do the downtown farmers market for like years, and so we're looking at trying to re-up some sort of partnership with them that would kind of be like collaborative. So yes, and that's a great place. We've been also approached by representatives from the farmers market at the Civic Center, which is traditionally like the county's territory. But yeah, we're thinking about how to roll that back out. We had brought a book bike. We have a book bike, like a three-wheel.
I was gonna say, Henry,
yeah.
What happened to the bike?
Yeah, the bike's in storage, but re-upping, possibly with a culinary literacy facet, because libraries have, and especially Free Library of Philadelphia and San Francisco, have been really big in kind of demonstrating cooking, and like food literacy is so exciting. So yeah, we got that on the list, and the downside had been we didn't really have a very efficient vehicle or way to get there, so it was like a ton of staff time, and then it lasts a long time, and so we're trying to kind of make it more efficient to be able to just deploy the staff at the farmer's market. But we had like 50 people watching a Jenga game in front of the library booth. So it was kind of awesome. So we got to get back to that, you know, because, and also we would do a craft, and sometimes at least once we had the 3D printer there. So we got a lot to kind of offer there, and the market people have been very great to work with. So kind of keeping it rolling in you know, in the new COVID era, whenever that, you know, usually, you know, that our downtown market closes down, except for starts in the spring. So when it's right, we hope to get back to that.
Cool.
Question, Eric Hahn here. There's a lot of great ideas out there. Just curious, Katie, how you guys are thinking about determining kind of which ideas to experiment with, and then how you're going to think about what ideas you may want to carry forward after you do some of that.
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, and Henry, feel free to step in. Library outreach, I will be looking at a lot of the outreach I've done. I've done a lot of tabling in my life, and if I go to an event and everybody I talk to, I say, hey, have you heard about the library? Do you have a library card? Sometimes they say, hey, yes, we love the library. We go all the time. And that feels good, right? For me and for them, but that means I didn't go to the right event, right? They already knew about the library. And so outreach is a lot of schlepping, right? Like Henry said, it's a lot of tables and chairs and banners, but it's also about partnership building. And so I've found that community partners are often the ones who tip me off and say, hey, have you thought about going to this like health fair for people who don't have health insurance? And I hadn't heard about it. And you're like, oh, no, that would be perfect, right? So I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot of trial and error involved. And sometimes you go to an event once or twice and you think, okay, that wasn't quite the group we were trying to reach. And so my ideas are sort of necessarily vague at this point because we are in this weird pandemic where some of these are more notional right now than practical. Henry, do you have anything to add there?
I would say yes. And for the things that like Katie describes in terms of event-based outreach, the school outreach, that's sort of folded within, you know, our library staffing and model in terms of, you know, our relationships with the schools. And I would heard that anything that we can benefit from a collaboration with a community partner, we would jump upon. But as far as like the actual home delivery, it's kind of going to be guided by budgetary concerns, i.e., if we wanted to do something like San Francisco does, it's like kind of expensive, even though there's kind of book rate, it's still kind of a ton of work to mail things to people. So I think if we can trial and error and or create like a grassroots adopt a street kind of thing, sort of like adopt a storm drain, that would be both effective and economical, that will like kind of determine what's the best solution, you know, backed up by the kind of library boots on the ground.
Katie, can I add that I totally hear you on saying that, you know, people say that I know the library and, you know, we use it, but I think one of the things, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that not everyone always knows what's available at the library. And so just thinking ahead, because I'm in the situation right now, is what happens when our schools are shutting down and what's happening when summer's coming, because I'm literally in the situation right now. And I think there are opportunities, I don't know how, but, you know, opportunities to say we have, I mean, the big thing right now for, you know, the elementary schools are like, are there free coding programs, you know, are there, obviously the audiobooks, I think a lot of people know of that because we think books, but I know that you have other programs. I don't necessarily, I've never used them, but I might explore them, but I'm just saying, even if you are at events where people know about it, maybe it's what might be available, especially right now with classes shutting down. Knocking on wood that no one hears kids or places do, but it's happening.
Yeah, and that's that piece that we were talking about. Apologies, my internet connection is a little on the fritz right now. To not assume that people know what we're doing and to continually make the community aware of what we're offering, with the understanding that that is very dynamic for the library too right now. And when I try to think about what we're going to be offering this summer, boy, are there a lot of variables there that I cannot currently predict. So, and I think everyone understands that, but the library is such a rock solid thing in people's mind, in the community. And I like the idea that, we're offering something, you just don't know what it is, right? So we're kind of in that boat, and we will certainly work to promote our services over the summer. I appreciate that viewpoint from someone who has school-age children in their life.
Hi, Katie. Thank you. This is Cheryl. I just had a couple of questions. You mentioned outreach to people experiencing homelessness and also Marin community clinics. Are you still, I'm working with Health and Human Services on a project. Are you still planning like a little mini children's library area at the social services lobby there at the Kerner campus, as well as anything at Marin community clinics? Is that still something you're considering or looking at or doing?
Yes, exactly. And I would appreciate it. I'm working on making the right connection there. I think with the holidays and stuff, I need to get that going again. But yes, the Kerner Clinic is what we had in mind. And then did you have a question about?
Yeah, so when you're mentioning, you're thinking of also looking at how to outreach to people experiencing homelessness. Are you also looking at like some of the supportive housing, the transitional housing that we do have in San Rafael, and kind of going to those sites as well? Is that the kind of thing you're thinking about?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Let me tell you what we were thinking about. So people experiencing homelessness, a lot of those folks do use the library, right? Those are folks we see every single day in the library. But one barrier for those folks can be the use of materials. So we often find that those folks will be using materials in the library, and then they'll kind of just put them aside on a table, and they're kind of hoping they'll be there again tomorrow. And that's, we clear them away. It's part of the process. But the thing is, they may not feel safe or comfortable checking materials out because they're not sure they can keep those materials safe. And so one thing we're working on is creating some kind of waterproof bags that we could issue, with the library logo, et cetera. It's kind of like a tote bag, but just waterproof. It's called a dry sack. And so if we could issue those, for example, maybe at the city's New Services Support Center, or just as we work with folks in the community, then that's a way that they could potentially feel more comfortable, taking the book with them, or just using it for their own belongings, but just letting them know that the library cares about them, and we want them to be able to use the library's materials, not just the building. So
great. Oh, that's great. No, I mean, it's really great to hear all your ideas. I think it's really wonderful that you're trying to expand that outreach and make sure you're reaching more people. So thank you.
One last question, probably for me, Katie, because I think everyone's gone. Very impactful topic. I really particularly liked, in terms of bringing items to people's homes, the neighborhood approach. So when I go to the library, to say to my neighbors, hey, I'm popping to the library, do you have any items that you have checked out or that are on hold, or something like that, and or to return. I think that's completely feasible, and the only reason we don't do it is because I don't have their library card. Like, so just somehow having a process that makes it easy. I think that could be a good way. I mean, I've had neighbors who, people are getting sick, they don't want to leave their house, so being able to drop off books to them, that'd be good. And the other thing I was thinking, that as this variant is doing its rounds, the safe places nextdoor.com, a lot of people go in there, and so publishing some of the programs there, and this homebound adult outreach ideas would be, and processes that you put in place, I think could be a place that there's a lot of eyes going on that.
Yes, thank you for that. I had too much on my slides, so I had to skip over it, but I'm really interested in this group called Good Fairies of Marin. So that's kind of a grassroots group that formed on Nextdoor during the pandemic. And it is, last time I checked, several hundred people strong, and they assist their neighbors with all kinds of tasks. So I look at that and think, wow, would any of those folks be interested in picking up library materials? And I haven't made a connection there yet. So if anyone knows someone who's involved in Good Fairies of Marin, I'm all ears.
Yeah, and even just putting, you know, information out there on Nextdoor in the feed of the Centerville neighborhoods, I think would be another way. Great. Any other questions? Or I can open to public comments. Is there anyone who's joined? No.
No attendees.
So, okay, so then I'm going to public comment. So I guess I'll go to the next agenda item, right? Which is agenda item 4, review proposed collection and development policy and gift donation policy.
So,
Thanks, Katie.
hello, everyone. I'm next up on the agenda. So one staff presentation to the next. Should I just jump in? Does that work for everyone? Yes, okay. So let me share my screen because I have another presentation. It's the night for presentations by library staff. Hopefully everyone can see my screen well. So again, just to introduce myself, I'm Jamie Poirier. I'm also a supervising librarian here at Centerville. And yeah, before you is a review of some proposed policy adjustments for the collection development policy and the creation of a gift and donation policy. And so, sorry. So libraries across the US regularly adopt collection development policies to guide purchases and just sort of inform the public and help provide a guideline for staff on what it is that we're doing with the actual materials that we have, right? The books, the audiobooks, the movies, things like that. These policies tend to be written and developed locally. We like to look at industry best practices, but also keeping in mind like our specific community needs. And related to that is the creation of a gift and donation policy. So our current collection development policy includes some information about the exception of gifts and or donations, but we think that those need to be a separate thing. They can refer to each other, but do not necessarily need to be in the same document. And this might actually be a repeat of some information because this topic was before you all in February of 2020. And it's taken us a little while during a pandemic and reopening the library to not only adopt all of the changes that were suggested by the board at that time, but to go through some other city processes to actually try to get these policies moved forward. So apologies to those of you that maybe have gotten some of this information, and my presentation tonight will mostly be focusing on the updates to the fall of 2020 information, but it will certainly hopefully give folks who weren't board members at that time also the needed information to hopefully make an informed decision or recommendation. So just some brief background. Again, the collection development policy is really meant to be like a steering document for both staff and then an informational document for the public. It would provide criteria used when we're looking at what we need to add to our collection, or if there's anything that maybe needs adjustment or that would be better served somewhere else. Occasionally, libraries are presented with challenges, like maybe one particular book, somebody has concerns about it or wants it removed from the collection. And so this collection development policy would address how we handle those requests for reconsideration. Our current policy was actually approved in 2013 and initially was meant to have a 5-year scope. So we are a number of years sort of past due to get this addressed. And again, just to recap that this may be a repeat of information since it was presented to all of you in October of 2020. And then again, a gift and donation policy would guide staff and public on how and when the library accepts gifts or monetary donations, and then actual donations, which would be physical materials. And no changes have been made to the gift and donation policy since fall of 2020, but I'll still briefly recap what that policy hopefully will look like. So just a brief, like a little bit more detail about the collection development policy itself. The 2013 version was really pretty lengthy and covered a lot of procedural things that I don't think that we don't think that the general public necessarily needs the information on. So I'll give some examples in just a minute. Changes to the actual fall 2020 draft, there were suggestions made by the board to make sure that we're addressing diversity and representation. And so the revised policy that was attached to tonight's meeting packet does have a paragraph about, how we're representing not only the community that we serve, but perhaps people who don't match those in the community, because that kind of representation is very vital. And then there was a second piece that has been added since the fall of 2020, and that's to clarify formats. So the fall 2020 version just assumed that sort of everything that we were talking about was like a physical material. And at some point it occurred to those of us in the library that we need to make sure that this policy also covers ebooks and other e-resources, because those are certainly also materials that are offered, even if it's not like a physical tangible thing. So since fall of 2020, those changes and suggestions were adopted. And then we've also had our city's finance director take a look at this policy. Library staff and other city administration folks are working on finalization, which is hopefully ready to go. There may be some tweaks, some formats and things like that, but we're hoping that the content itself is ready to move forward. And now just for a couple of examples. So this screen looks really busy. You're not meant to read all of this. This is just an example of the actual 2013 version, the current one, and the updated version. So going from, something where you really have to take a lot of time to try to understand what this policy is doing, and especially for members of the public, I think that this could be an overwhelming amount of information. So we're really trying to simplify what the policy is, streamline that information, kind of condense where we can, and make it easier to understand, not only for the public, but also for staff, so that we don't get bogged down in a lot of details. And then we have one other example. I actually have two slides of examples. So this is, again, from the 2013 collection development policy. This is talking about how we handle replacements. So if somebody lost and paid for a book, or if a material goes missing, we have details in here that kind of seem extraneous to what the general public, I think, needs to know, as far as what we do when we don't have the materials anymore. And then, what do we do if the materials that we do have on the shelves are out of date, or otherwise, need to be considered, whether or not it's relevant. So we're going from these very busy slides to one combined thing covering both topics. So again, just trying to really simplify that material, the information that's presented to the public. So this slide would be actually a combination of the previous two, if hopefully that makes sense. And again, just trying to make sure that the public understands, and so do staff, in a more condensed fashion, what it is that we're actually trying to do with all of the materials that are offered. So that's collection development policy. And now just a brief discussion about the actual gift and donation policy. So as I mentioned earlier on, the current way that we accept gifts and donations is really tied to a collection development policy. But that's assuming that all of the things that people want to give us are all physical materials, and that's certainly not the case. Henry and some of our support groups even frequently receive bequests and other monetary donations, and it seems like we need to make sure that we're handling that in kind of the proper way. So instead of just having this loose idea of how the check is going to be processed, or what we'll accept and what we won't, we wanted to clarify that a lot, not only for staff, but really for the public. So again, there's no changes that have really been made to this since the fall of 2020, but for library board members that weren't around at that time. This policy is meant to, yeah, just give us like some clear guidelines, because frankly, we don't want someone making a donation of, I don't know, maybe a few $1,000s, but giving us that gift with strings attached, right? So we want to make sure that we as staff and as the city are in control of what we accept, when we accept it, that sort of thing. So that's what the goal of this policy is. Again, this policy, just like the collection development one, has been reviewed by the city's finance director, library staff, and other city administrators are working on just trying to finalize this policy. And we're hoping that, you know, you've all had a chance to review it, just to provide feedback as we go to making it final. I know I went pretty fast through those slides, but that's the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to clarify or, you know, take any questions or concerns you have.
Thank you. Any questions from trustees?
Jamie, Alex, but I was just wondering, you mentioned the folks who reviewed the policies, the finance director and administration. Does the city attorney review these policies too? Or?
That's a great question. At this point, I actually think that my part is done. So I'd have to refer to Henry and Susan to be able to answer that question.
I believe the deputy city attorney looked it over before it went to finance. So yes, I believe that is correct.
Great question, Alex. Are there any other questions? I'm not surprised, because a lot of you were board members at that time, and I think that we had a great discussion back then. But Henry and Susan and I felt like it was really important that we obviously bring this topic forward, just to make sure that all of you have a chance to weigh in, especially since you had made some really great recommendations. So thank you for your initial feedback from, you know, 15 months ago. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
Jamie, are we highly encouraging gifts directly to the library, or do we prefer that they go through the friends?
I think yeah, I'm going to defer to Henry on that one, because he's really the one to probably deal with that more than I am.
That's a great question. Often people contact us for memorial gifts, and you know, they have the option of donating directly to the library and or going through the friends and supporting them to support us. So it really, you know, runs the gamut. We don't actively solicit donations per se in the way that some institutions do. Like, for example, Kitsap County Libraries has a pamphlet that says, make Kitsap County part of your estate planning, part of your estate planning. And that's relevant because we've received several large bequests from people that made us part of their estate planning like 20 years ago, to the tune of like 2 million-ish. So I think it bears some consideration, but we haven't actively been forming a PR strategy around that. That said, we do tend to get general amounts varying from 100 to 1,000 that people kind of just, you know, we have very big brand recognition, and sort of like giving to the library is kind of like, I don't know, I think it's sort of foundational in the community support, you know, sort of mechanism for it, particularly in terms of trusts, you know, like estate planning. Yeah. And specifically sometimes when someone passes away, they really want to kind of memorialize that person either with a specific book with a book plate, or just like, you know, in memory of so and so, here's this money. So yeah, it kind of runs the gamut.
Henry, for clarification, are you encouraging, sorry, I think I got confused. You're encouraging people, if they want to do that, to give to the friends rather than the foundation?
Well, the foundation in and of itself, you know, is a separate 501(c)(3) that is specifically about, you know, building a new library. So when they want to give to us, that, you know, we receive money, you know, for our operations. So we would describe like, you know, if you give it to us, here's what happens. If you give it to the friends, they're a nonprofit and we ask them for money. The foundation might come up as part of that conversation. If they were interested in the new library, you can contribute to that. So it all depends upon, most often donors don't actually contact us to ask how they can support us. They just kind of send a check. So I'm just thinking about one conversation I had with a specific person about someone who had died. And I think in that context, maybe the foundation didn't come up, but that's kind of a good reminder that the foundation is also a related arm that could receive funding.
And sorry, just to chime in with one other piece of information, because the library is tied to the city organization, we are not a 501c3. So if people are looking for a tax write-off, then they would have to consult their tax professionals on whether or not a donation made directly to the library, AKA city, could be claimed on their taxes or not. I have no idea, honestly, because I'm not a CPA or a tax person, but that is something that often, or sometimes at least, comes up in consideration when folks want to make a donation that benefits the library. Going to the Friends or Foundation may be a different option for them that would work better, but we are more than happy to take people's money.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from trustees? Public comment? Do we have anyone on the line?
No.
I want to
Okay,
add
and that-
one more thing
sorry.
before we move on. Just so you're aware, one of the other reasons for the gift policy is there is kind of the phenomenon of people trying to influence the collection by donation of specific materials. So people with any particular kind of outlook, a great example is you'll receive a box of 25 L. Ron Hubbard books. And there's this phenomenon of sort of inundating the public library with materials by donation as a way to influence the collection philosophy. So having a sort of, stated collection purpose with goals and sort of is a way to kind of mitigate that type of manipulation in some way. Even putting books on the shelf, like hiding them in the shelf, as a way of kind of influencing the collection. It doesn't really happen in our area, but it's a phenomenon within public libraries in America, which is somewhat fascinating. But the reason that we have a specific policy with regards to gift and donation and collection development writ large.
Mm-hmm. Great point.
Well, thank you all so much for your time this evening.
Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie.
All right, let's move on to item 5, which is other brief reports on any meetings, conferences, and/or seminars attended by board members. If no one raised their hands, I can move to the next item, 6, other brief program updates or reports on any meetings, conferences, and/or seminars attended by staff.
Thanks, Chair Duke Hughes. You'll notice this agenda item isn't articulated in its subsequent parts A through, I think, G that we used to have. That said, we have revised our script regarding this to include public comment on this item, which we weren't aware of at the previous meeting when someone wanted to comment on this. I think largely because specifically new library updates are on this section, which we have some things to update about. The first thing I wanted to share was I have an update on our new allergy nut awareness sign that I wanted to just share my screen because I wanted to kind of update the board that we had finalized some images for that. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick.
Henry, I was thinking about that today.
Yes. So this is our new nut-free zone. Please do not bring items with nuts into this area. And it also includes the same in Spanish. And we'd like to just move ahead and deploy these signs in our public areas, specifically in the children's area, just to kind of raise awareness. And thanks, shout out to Jill Tokutomi for redoing the sign. I can include this with the meeting, and I'm just going to stop sharing. So there's that. Since our last meeting, a lot of people took December off, including the Friends, MarinNet, NorthNet, so none of them have met. So the Library Board of Trustees did meet in December with some exciting news from Mary Beth Bushy that she shared with the board, which I'll try to reiterate for you now. Well, Cheryl, were you at that meeting? Yes. Okay, so a couple of really awesome things are happening. One of them is related to, we're going to put out a survey by Godby Incorporated to measure people's reaction to some funding mechanisms that look very promising for our new library building. So they include, but are not limited to property transfer tax, which would be a general tax at 50%, which is very exciting, because we've also considered a bond measure or parcel tax, which is a 66.6% threshold. So what we're doing now, and what the city tends to do in the instances, is have a scientific survey launched, which we hope to happen very soon in the spring, to measure people's reaction to this funding mechanism, among others. And that really kind of has been a big question about our new library project, despite the numerous studies, is like, well, where's the funding coming from? And having a funding mechanism that seems like, number one, it will be enough to pay for what we are looking at, and number two, could pass by could a 50% margin for a library thing, we tend to think is very possible. But that's why we're going to the survey, to get some feedback on that. Did I leave anything out, Susan? Wait, you're muted. I can't hear you, but yeah, I don't know why. Okay, while she's working on that, it's pretty exciting. It's kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel double stuff. And Godby is who the city uses for most of our public surveying. It includes not only internet, in-person calling, etc. It's going to be paid for by the capital set aside for Measure D. Susan.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank goodness. Well, it depends if you want to hear from me or not, I guess.
Yes.
Depends on how you feel about that. I just wanted to make sure if the board had any questions in regards to the community survey. We're super excited about this because it will measure the community's support for either the renovation and expansion of the existing Carnegie, or whether or not it would support the library and community center, which would be a new facility down at Albert Park. And how they're going to do that, they're really not going to ask, which one do you prefer? They're going to look at the dollar threshold. There's obviously a different funding requirement for renovating and expanding the Carnegie versus building a brand new library community center. So we don't have all the details yet. Tomorrow is actually our meeting with the consultant to go over some of the questions that will be asked in the survey. Henry did mention the property transfer tax. That seems to be the most promising funding option because of the 51% requirement. And something that Henry didn't mention, but I know he knows all about this, it's one of the few tax options that the funding source can be used for everything in the library. So there are some tax measures and funding options out there for capital improvements, but you can't use them for furniture and fixtures, people, programs, collections, stuff like this. So it is pretty exciting that it could be used for everything that the library would need to have in order to function. In case you get a question, and again, I don't want to get too much in the details, our current property transfer tax for San Rafael is at $2 per 1,000 valuation of property. And that is low. There are some cities that are at 12, 10, 8, etc. So we've got quite a bit of a margin to go if that is something that the community is willing to support. And people ask, so when does that happen? I'm sure some of you are very familiar with it. But it is actually a item when you go to sell your house that's negotiated between the seller and buyer. It's not always a seller, it's not always a buyer, but it's negotiated. And again, it's applied to that valuation of that property. And it's like, if it's $2 per 1,000 valuation. So it's a one-time thing. It's not an ongoing assessment or anything like that. It's when that property transfers. So hopefully I answered some questions. And there are some cities that just passed it in the last couple of years to fund libraries, as well as libraries, parks, rec, and all kinds of stuff. One of the ones that I know down south that just did it was Culver City. They did it a year ago during COVID. When we did the sales tax measure, they passed it. And they even did a different application of it where they had, and some cities do this, they don't do a flat increase. They do a increase based on evaluation of property. So they applied so much percentage points of property up to $1 million and so much more from $1.1 million to $1.5 million and so forth. So things can be really crafted to fit what the city wants and what the city and the community will support. So it can even exclude, I'm using the improper term, affordable housing, which is not the right term nowadays, but there's all kinds of exceptions that the city and council, if we get to that point, if this community-wide survey supports it, the council can really craft something that they feel that the community will support completely with some of those exceptions. Like if somebody should pass on and inherit property, does it apply? Affordable housing, does it apply? So I'm giving you a lot of information, but once this thing starts going and we find out where we are and whether the community will support, there's going to be a lot of questions, and we're going to be including you in that dialogue because people are going to expect that you're going to be able, by rote, know all the answers. And you shouldn't have to know all that. We will be figuring that out and making sure that that's available for public consumption, but we'll want to make sure that you see it as well.
Thank you. Are there any other items, Henry, that you were going to update us on?
That's about it, given that there were very few meetings in that period since we last spoke. It looks like Jamie had her hand up and other people, so I will mute myself.
Yeah, questions from trustees? Jamie.
So, two things. So, who did I miss it? Who's funding the survey?
Yes, we are funding it from our capital set aside for Measure D for the new library as part of the initial Measure C that came before Measure D. There was set aside for capital improvements that was capped at a little over 500,000. So we have plenty there to kind of pay for this. So it's us, I guess, for Measure D.
How much is it?
It's around 30-ish.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Henry, I don't want to, I feel like we kind of sweeped through the NutFree policy piece, and that was a huge discussion that we had. I don't think anyone else was on the board at that time. This was all in person. And so I would like to, if you can email that form, I'm okay with, I have it going up now, but I would really like to see, because we spent a lot of time and effort on making sure that we felt that we had input from people who have severe nut allergies and their concerns. And so I want to make sure that everything that we had talked about before was addressed. So if you can send that and do that, because I don't remember where again, this was like pre-pandemic. So I just want to make sure that we are, ensuring that all those voices and those conversations are reflected in that.
I would be happy to send you the updated images that I shared. And I could reiterate some of the conversation around that. I think the city attorney had weighed in that though we couldn't specifically ban the use of nuts in the library, that we could raise awareness and suggest that people don't consume nuts in the library. Specifically, we were most concerned about in the children's room. Yes. So
right. However, if I recall correctly, it was a city attorney saying there was a recommendation. It was not a needs to be this way, and that we had the authority to choose how we wanted that policy. If I recall that conversation, again, this was 18 months ago plus. So, but I just want to make sure that we're not missing that. So just if we can ensure that if we need to have a further conversation, that we're adding it to the agenda next time.
yes, I guess my interpretation of the city attorney's recommendation is more or less a direction from the city attorney about what to do. So I think it would sort of indicate that the board wouldn't be advised or empowered to make a policy that was against advice of the city attorney in the nicest way, but to move towards a suggestion. But if you would like us to bring that back and have a larger discussion at the next meeting, that works.
Yeah, what I would like at the next meeting is maybe where we landed, where the board had landed, and then where we're landing here, because I want to see what the difference is. Because I understand the position that you're in with the city attorney, but again, we're talking about people's lives and children with severe nut allergies. So I don't have an issue bringing this up again and having a more in-depth conversation. And so if we need to do that, again, I don't remember. So like if there is not an issue, then this is a moot point, right? But I don't want to not look back to where we had thought we had landed, and then we're looking at something differently because we just don't recall. So if we can just kind of have that reflection and make sure we're not missing something. Sound good?
Sure. Susan, were you gonna weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty good recollection of it, but it's been 18 months and the majority of the board was not here. So there's no harm in us summarizing in a very brief staff report of the work that was done prior, what the feedback was from the city attorney and the direction was, and the result of that recommendation. And so that everybody has all that information in one document and we can discuss it. There's no problem with that. We don't have to run out there and post the signs today. The reason why it's so clear to Henry and I, we were given that direction after the meeting 18 months ago of this is what we can and cannot do. And we brought it back to the library board at that time and advised them. And we were going to post the signs, then we shut down for the pandemic. So it is literally a fog. But we have no problem. We've got all that documentation. We can, assemble it in a nice little format for you and bring it back to you. It'll be to everybody's benefit, because when you get questions, you'll have the whole story. Not a problem.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And again, I have no problem posting it for now. It's better to have something there than nothing, but yeah, just do that. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I also had a comment on the signs. What jumped at me is that, and I really welcome any policy with education and suggestions about the nuts. So very happy to see that. Just to note that nut allergies, since we have such an international community in San Rafael, nut allergies are not a worldwide phenomenon. So it might be something that we might need to provide a little bit of information also as to which nuts are the ones that are generally that we're referring to, right? Because, and my kids know more about this than me, about which tree nuts are allergen and which nuts are not nuts and all sorts of things. So even if the pictures would just say, these are the ones that you don't, and the one in Spanish, the word that's being used there is actually more referring to walnuts and pecans than peanuts, which are the most dangerous ones, right? So So I would just perhaps expand a little bit the science to contain more of the images and a little bit of why a NutFree zone, because we came from Europe and it was non-existent over there, and I know that in many Latin American countries also there's not so much of a persistence, or it's not such an ubiquitous. Anyone who's been here for a long time, or even in the school system, I think we're all aware, but maybe for those who are newer to the country, or not in the school system and haven't been to a place where nuts are not recommended. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would just
Yes.
say we did have this conversation. We did want to put like granola bars and all these things so people can understand. I don't remember where we landed on that, but we did have some. Maybe people just think like a peanut rather than like granola bars have tons of nut and stuff like that. But
to add to the complication, the word peanut is so localized that there's so many words in different Spanish from different countries. So probably the picture would make more sense, right?
Yeah, thank you for that feedback, Adriana. I believe we can incorporate that into what we bring back. What I'm understanding, just to reflect back, is more of in-depth information and explanation about the phenomenon of nut allergy, included with the science, and also kind of a deeper understanding of how we're defining this in Spanish, and for taking into account regional variations and specific nuts, and that there's other places in the world where nut allergies are less of a thing, or not the thing that it is here. So yeah, that's great. I think that one of our strengths in the library is providing information to people about stuff. So I'm feeling more of a display feel with like information and kind of, so which would be very satisfying, I think, for the staff to engage more in, and we can put that as part of what we bring back.
Wonderful. I'm sure there's a book about, or several books with information about allergies. Any other comments or questions from trustees? Public comment, assuming anyone joined.
Yes, we do have one attendee. So I will go ahead and read the script. If you wish to provide public comment and are watching this meeting through Zoom, please use the raise hand function to let us know you would like to speak. If you are participating by telephone and wish to provide public comment, please press *9. When it is your turn to speak, you will be notified that the host is inviting you to participate. You will need to press *6 to unmute yourself. Once you are unmuted, you will have 3 minutes to provide your comments. So I'm just going to see if this person is interested in providing comments. No, it doesn't seem like this person is.
Okay, so I close public comment. And if there are no more questions from trustees or the public, then I'll just read that the next meeting is February 8th, 2022. And, or Henry, are you sharing that, or am I? The bit in black?
Yes, I'll say that. And we're looking forward to, we had planned to bring RFID tagging update, but they just started tagging yesterday. So we look forward to talking more about RFID tagging at the next meeting, in addition to the nuts and whatever else we bring forward. So yes.
Great. So we can adjourn the meeting at 7:13 p.m.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great
Thank
night.
you.
Thanks. Good
Thanks,
night, everyone.
Adriana. Thanks,
Thank
Jamie.
you.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you,
Thanks, Eric.
everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Susan.
Jinder.
See ya.